Hello, everyone. You're listening to Literature Only. Today, we are reviewing Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I'm Tom. This is Liam. What did you think of the book?
I thought it was pretty good. I've been reading it and listening to the audiobooks for a couple years now. It's like comfort food. It's very familiar. It's very there's a nice feeling. It's a nice world to enter of magic. It's obviously super famous. We don't really need to review the what the book's about. Everyone knows this book. And I think it holds up not only for kids but for people our age. It's
Hmm.
still entertaining, fun.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I have my notes here, and you also have your notes. So I
Yeah.
think a good order of operations would be for you to go through your notes first, and then I can go through mine.
Sure, I'll start. One of the themes is bravery, being loyal to your friends, doing what's right. And I thought it was interesting that we have several examples of Harry sort of being incredibly innocent rather than brave, and that sort of innocence and I guess just not even considering doing the bad thing sort of helps him in this story, which is kind of interesting. Like his ignorance helps him, um, and sort of makes him appear brave. There's one part on page 75 of my edition, where they're talking. So you can't say Voldemort's name, and Ron is sort of getting upset that Harry says Voldemort instead of he who must not be named, or you know who.
Hmm.
And Harry says, I'm not trying to be very brave or anything, saying the name, said Harry. I just never knew you shouldn't. See what I mean? So he's not making a conscious decision to fight Voldemort by saying his name. He's just sort of ignorant of the rules. And I thought it was interesting that the outsider kind of gets to have that position. Um, which you can sometimes see in other stories. What do you think about that?
Hmm. Yeah, I felt that throughout the book, especially at the beginning, Harry is slowly learning about this world. And it's a world that we already know as, I guess, adults. And this book has been out for 20 plus years. We know Hogwarts. We know the School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. But reading this when it first came out must have been a completely different experience.
Yeah, definitely.
But but yeah, I suppose Harry does have this naivety and this ignorance. But as the story progresses and he learns more about the world, that naivety does turn into a sort of courage, because there is a scene at the end with Hagrid where this is after Dumbledore tells Harry, just say the name. Uh,
Yeah.
fear of the name causes fear of the thing itself. Super famous quote. Um, and so Harry just basically screams in Hagrid's face, Voldemort.
Right. Yeah.
So it is him intentionally being brave. And I
Yeah.
also thought it was
Later in the
interesting.
book, he learns to be more intentional about it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But early on, definitely he's like saying Voldemort's name because he doesn't know the significance
Yeah. He
of the
doesn't get
name.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't get it. I did find it interesting that courage, yeah, is a huge aspect of this book, and people are sorted into um, Gryffindor because of their courage. Like the defining characteristic of Gryffindor is courage. But there's a really interesting scene where Malfoy says that all Gryffindor does is take losers. It takes poor kids like Ron, uh, losers like Harry, and screw ups like Neville. But in the end, each of them shows courage. Like their
Right.
defining feature is courage by the end of the book.
Yeah. It just the character of Neville, to touch on that real quick, he's always seen as sort of a cowardly and kind of pathetic character. And even from the
Mm-hmm.
get-go, he kind of proves his bravery. He stands up to Malfoy and Crabbe and Goyle, and he also stands up to Harry and Ron and Hermione, trying to
Mm-hmm.
get them to stop rule breaking. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to mention that. Um,
There's also that really famous quote at the end where Dumbledore says, "It takes courage to stand up to your enemies, but it takes even more courage to stand up to your friends."
right. I like that quote too. That's a good quote.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That makes sense. It's sort of like talking about inside your group, controlling and then yeah, having that type of bravery. Yeah, I like that moment. So when J.K. Rowling is writing this book, it's so from our standpoint now, this is a like $1 billion industry, right? There's movies, there's all these books, there's theme
Mm-hmm.
parks,
The
and
best-selling book series of all time.
right.
Yeah.
It's not like when she's imagine writing this, you don't know if any of this is going to be successful, and she just makes this completely new world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very ambitious, and she really pulls it off.
Mm-hmm.
And it manages to create this um, really compelling story inside of this completely new world. And I thought
Mm-hmm.
it's really impressive when you actually think about it.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I mean, there's so many different iconic scenes in this book. I mean, I wasn't a. I guess I should bring up that I was never a huge Harry Potter fan. I saw the movies for the first time, like maybe 4 years ago. So while I was in my 20s, I thought I'd read this book before. I hadn't. When I was 10, I think I read the first 3 chapters or so and then kind of gave up. I was more of a Star Wars kid. That was kind of my thing. And I do see parallels between the two. The battle between good and evil, the dark side is mentioned in this book and going to the dark side. Um, Even though I wasn't a huge fan of uh, this series, I still know a lot of the scenes. And there's a really, I thought, strange and almost beautiful moment when Harry is going to see the mirror of Erised, or it's
Eris said, yeah,
desire,
yeah.
desire spelled backwards. Um, and Dumbledore finds him there, and he's staring at uh, the image of his family in the mirror. I mean, it's the one thing that he desires is a family. And spoiler alert, he kind of finds a family at Hogwarts, you know. But but then Dumbledore tells him that many men have lost themselves, like pining for the past, basically, wishing they could turn things back to the way they were. And I thought that moment was just so touching and really strange for a children's book. I mean,
Right.
it's such a, adult concept, I think.
Yeah. There's a lot of good writing in here. There's a lot of adult themes that aren't sort of like dumbed down, quote unquote, dumbed down
Mm-hmm.
for a younger audience. I watched one interview where she said she wasn't explicitly writing for a younger audience. Like she so when she's doing the edit or whatever, she mentioned she'll change some words to be more simple and monosyllabic, I think she said, instead of having longer words. Other than that, she mentioned that she was just sort of like she was writing for her. She would have liked this world, this story, and yeah, not dumbing it down for kids, and that's what makes it sort of hold up even for an older audience, I think.
Mm-hmm. I mean, especially, well, considering the fact she was writing for herself, she was dealing with the grief of the death of her mother while she was writing this. So, partly to deal with her grief, she wrote about it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I wanted to read. There's this one quote which is great. They defeat a mountain troll,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a great line about friendship. But from that moment on, Hermione Granger became their friend. There are some things you can't do without ending up liking each other, and knocking out a 12-foot mountain troll is one of them.
Yeah. No,
Great
I
line.
great line. And I made note of that through my read through as well.
Yeah,
There's just, yeah, this beautiful element of friendship in this book. And that's why it's so attractive to read as a kid, because these kids are such great friends. And I even enjoyed reading it as an adult. Um, yeah. But this is another thing I wanted to touch on. Ron as the best friend figure. I mean, you didn't like Rinaldi in the last book we read, A Farewell to Arms, but I thought and I forgot to mention this, but Rinaldi reminded me of um, Razumikin from Crime and Punishment. You know, just like
Yeah.
kind of the oaf, the best friend. He's kind of a
Helping
moron.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, helping out. You know, a bit of comic relief. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and I just love that figure in books. That's like my favorite. It's kind of a trope, but it's like my favorite trope, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Ron. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely get that. The friendship, uh, it also has this vibe of like reminding you of what like kind of like what camp was like. At least for me, that's
Mhm.
what it felt like going back to summer camp in my mind and like getting into trouble. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, do we want to talk about some so I thought maybe okay, so deep cut, but in The Sopranos, Bobby Bacala mentions that um Harry Potter is inspiration for like 98-pound weaklings. And looking past the Italian bravado, there is a criticism, I guess you can make of it being escapism. So you're like kind of a loser, you're getting picked on in your real life, and then you find out, oh, you're a wizard and you're a celebrity, you're rich, you have everything you could ever want in this world. It's not a perfect world, but it's like a lot better, and you have a lot more you're dealt in, you have power in a way that you don't have in the ordinary world. Do you think that there's like this escapism? Do you think that's valid? Escapism criticism?
Yeah, I think the escapism, I mean, I don't know if it's valid criticism because I think that the escapism is probably an overall good. Because when I was reading through, I thought that this is basically the fantasy of any underprivileged kid, not only in the UK, but all over the world. I mean, this boy who thinks he's poor, he finds out he's rich. He has like an entire safe full of gold that his parents left
Yeah.
him. You know, I mean, it's a fantasy for any poor, underprivileged kid. And he thinks he's a nobody, and then he finds out he's famous. He thinks he's average, and then he finds out he's, has superpowers basically. That he's a wizard. So I thought that yeah, this is kind of the entire book is essentially giving hope to kids that don't really have much. You know, and then there's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
aspect of this huge theme of class in this book, like rich versus poor. Like Ron is constantly berated by Malfoy for being poor,
Yeah.
and then Harry has grown up being very underprivileged. That's because his aunt and his uncle are basically tyrants, but he knows what it's like to not have anything, to just be given hand me downs. And then he stumbles upon wealth, but he knows what it's like to be Ron.
Right. I think it's interesting that he also gets to choose. There's a so when he's going to um Hogwarts, Malfoy sort of stumbles, or sorry, they meet in Madame Malcolm's robe shop. I think that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the when they actually arrive at Hogwarts, Malfoy is like, I'll teach you what the good is, what the bad is. I'll teach you, I'll be your friend. And so even at that early point, he has to choose between, you know, not to make it super dramatic, but good and evil. He has to choose between Malfoy and Ron and Slytherin and Gryffindor, and he chooses to stay with the person who's being picked on, who's looked down on, and who's a better friend in just a better person.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and there's all these parallels as well between Malfoy and Dudley and
yeah,
bullying.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that's another aspect of J.K. Rowling's upbringing is that she was bullied quite a lot growing up.
Right. And she is great at writing bullies for whatever reason. Like Malfoy is so annoying. He's such a brat, and he really stands out as a great character, if an annoying one.
Mm-hmm. I think Uncle Vernon actually is the biggest bully out of all of them because he's an adult and like he
Yeah.
has basically power over this innocent boy, and he decides to make Harry's life hell essentially.
Yeah. Him and Aunt Petunia are, yeah, bad people,
Mm.
caricatures. of
Uncle Vernon especially though. I think he's yeah
yeah,
he's
tyrant with a mustache
yeah
and a swollen belly.
yeah. All the best tyrants have mustaches.
Right. What is that? We need to make sure all our leaders are clean shaven, make sure they're not doing anything suspicious behind that mustache.
Yeah. Um, Anything else on your list?
I have so continuing on that kind of the same theme of escapism, there's a quote. Um, so Quirrell near the end of the book, there's a showdown, and he says, there is no good and evil, there is only power, and those too weak to seek it. Very Nietzschean, just sort of comes out of nowhere. I thought it wasn't totally, his character was a bit thin for me, a bit two-dimensional. Um, I don't know really what to think of it. So like the Nietzschean character is the villain in this.
Hmm.
What did you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was on purpose, obviously, because the counter to the guy who says everything is just about power is that I think the real message of the entire book is love. Like Harry is love of his friends, but also, I mean, the reason why Quirrell couldn't touch Harry was because somehow the love of his mother. It sounds super corny, obviously. It's
It's a bit,
a little bit
yeah,
heavy-handed,
sometimes
but
sentimental, but it's a
yeah.
nice message. The love of his mother sort of saves him, and then Quirrell slash Voldemort can't touch him.
Hmm. Yeah. And so all these people that have like a lust for power and think that power is sort of everything, the counter to that is that no, there's also love, and you've sort of
Yeah.
forgotten about that. And
Do you
that seems
think?
to be the virtue that's held up the most in the book.
Yeah, I agree. Do you think there's a sort of rebuke of relativism, kind of? I feel like that is like all there is power. There's nothing else.
Hmm.
Um, if you've got two people fighting, it's just fighting over power. There's nothing like there's no quote unquote virtue in no one's better or worse morally.
Mm.
I think whenever you have the Nietzschean as the villain, that's kind of a rebuke of moral relativism. Maybe I'm
Hmm.
looking too much into it, but
No, no, that's. I mean, there is no good or evil. I mean, the whole book basically is about good and evil. And I see that's something that they're trying to do now with the Star Wars, like trying to make it so that the Jedi also seem a little bit morally questionable. But
oh
if you look
really?
back, if you look back at the series, though, I mean, episode like the prequels, yeah, the Jedi are a little bit distrusting. They're a little bit. They also have a little bit of a thing with power, but they're trying to do the. You can see that they're trying to do the right thing. Um, and then you see in like episode 3 that you know Anakin slaughters children. I mean, that's
Right.
kind of like the most
But
evil thing you
but
could
that's
possibly do.
he turns into Darth Vader though.
He does, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean like the Sith are obviously like very evil.
Bad guys.
Like yeah. So I mean this there's no good or evil, only power. I mean the whole if you just read the book, the book itself is countering that. It's like there's also friendship, there's family, there's doing the right thing at the sacrifice of your own well-being. I mean, there's a lot more than power, than just power.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's it for me on my notes. I had one criticism of this sort of odd thing that Dumbledore does where he says, "You see, only one who wanted to find the stone, find it but not use it, would be able to get it. Otherwise, they just see themselves making gold or drinking the elixir of life." Um, and this is referring to Harry sees the stone but doesn't want to use it, and then it somehow teleports into his pocket, which is a bit odd. And then it's kind of strange that Dumbledore just sort of manufactures this scenario where the elixir of life is right next to Voldemort instead of just hiding the elixir of life, in a locked
You mean the
box in
stone?
London. the stone, yeah. Um, did, I didn't like that. That doesn't make it much sense to me.
Mm. Well, he had to hide the stone somewhere.
Right, but it doesn't need to be right beside Voldemort. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, I see what you're saying. Like, why would Dumbledore just drop the stone right in Harry's pocket, putting
Yeah,
him
yeah,
directly in harm's way?
right. Yeah,
Yeah, no, that is a very valid criticism. But there's also this aspect of Dumbledore is basically all knowing. I mean, at the very beginning of the book, he leaves Harry with his awful uncle and aunt for a reason, because he knows that fame and fortune would basically corrupt him. It would go to his head. And then
he
basically he knows all the events essentially that are going to happen
right.
essentially before they happen, and he lets them happen, and he basically he gives Harry the invisibility cloak because
Yeah,
essentially he knows that these kids are he knows their potential, he knows the challenges and that they will be able to handle it, and even though they might come into harm's way, it's a growing opportunity for them, so he voluntarily lets them get into trouble basically and almost get expelled and face Voldemort because he thinks they can do it.
yeah,
I thought that was interesting.
yeah. He's a good father figure. He's like allowing them to get into enough trouble to learn for themselves, but not letting them die, or hopefully not die. I mean, that's kind of a question as it comes up in later books, which I won't spoil, but like Dumbledore is sometimes I think, do you think it's like God, like trying to, I almost this God figure of someone who's um has to give his creation free will, but isn't going to interfere too much
Mm-hmm.
and sort of allows bad things to happen. Um, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, maybe, but also
Maybe.
he Harry almost dies. Like
Right.
at the end of the first book, it's like also Ron gets like smacked over the head by a stone
Right. Yeah.
statue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's a bunch of scenarios where like they open the door and then they immediately get attacked by a three-headed dog and instantly die.
yeah. I mean, that's I suppose that's why the book is so popular amongst children. I mean, the book was it's never been super popular with critics, but it won the 1997 Smarties Gold Award, and
Right.
that's a an award that's voted for by children. So kids love this book, but for
Yeah.
some reason adults are like, and I
I
feel that kids should be the authority of what kids like. Generally, it shouldn't be like a group of adults deciding what children should. And anyways, I don't know.
it's
That's a
also
debate.
it can also be an adult book. It's one of those things where like if you're reading it to your kids, there's
Mm-hmm.
something in it for you and there's something in it for them. And
Mm-hmm.
it's got those dimensions. I listened very briefly to the Harold Bloom interview where he talks about Harry Potter,
Mm-hmm.
and he says he's really harsh. He says it's not literature. He doesn't care. Like so, it's on Charlie Rose, and Charlie's like, "We've got all these kids reading. They're not watching TV. You don't think there's anything good in that?" And Harold Bloom says no, and says, all these millions of people are wrong. And I lost respect for him. I still like him as a critic. Obviously, he's a really famous. He's really influential, and he's good. He's not, he's very. I've read some of his books, and I appreciate them, but that comment is really silly, and I think he's just sort of reacting based on the popularity, and then wants to be maybe contrarian there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that gets into an entire debate on what is literature. And
Yeah,
it must be literature if we're talking about it.
yeah,
A literature only, baby. But I mean, that gets into a debate. Is Dr. Seuss literature? Is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? Is that literature? Is Lewis
I
Carroll
yeah.
literature?
I
Is
think
Lord of the Rings literature? Like, we
I
don't.
think there's room for snobbishness a little bit. You can say that maybe you wish people wouldn't be obsessed about 50 Shades of Grey and would instead be obsessed about Shakespeare. I can say that. That's fine. I think that's fine. But I don't know why. He really just doesn't like Harry Potter. I don't know. It's strange. And Harry Potter is great. There's nothing like, there's so many other books that are a lot of lesser quality than Harry Potter.
And I think if it gets kids reading like massive, what's the largest book in this series? Like over 500 pages, right?
Over 1,000, I think. Goblet of Fire is like,
Jeez.
it's pretty big.
Yeah. If it's getting children to read books over 1,000 pages long, I think that's a net win,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah, that's valuable.
Yeah.
I'm done my notes. I got through all mine.
Yeah. And I think I touched on everything.
Yeah.
Okay. So how's it going, man?
Great. I don't know. Job hunting. What's it like for you?
uh, it's a nightmare. But I'm
Yep.
also at this weird crossroads, I guess, where I need to finish my master's first, I think, before I can really apply for jobs because I don't think they're going to hire someone full time if they're still completing their master's.
In the midst of it, yeah.
I would like to write on my resume that I have a master's, not that I'm currently completing one because
Yeah.
I think it seems better. So I think I'm going to go really hard on because I've been just, browsing Indeed and browsing different job boards, but I think I
Yeah.
should just really focus on finishing the thesis. Hopefully have it finished by the end of September or at least mid-September so that I can
Yeah.
just focus full time. Because finding a job right now is basically full time. I was watching
Definitely.
videos of this, the guy Scott Galloway, the bald dude who's talks
Mm,
about how the younger generation is basically screwed and that the older generation is screwing them. Uh, and he's very opinionated, but I was listening to him and yeah, finding a job right now, and not just him that's saying it, but finding a job right now is hard
it's really
for,
tough.
yeah, for everybody.
In my city, Toronto, there's a thing called the CNE, which is like a festival at the end of the summer
The Canadian
and
National Exhibition.
exhibition. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in my father's generation, like getting a job at the CNE, that was like the worst of the worst. That you get made fun of. And this year, this summer, 2024, they received 10,000 plus applications from young people across the GTA, Greater
Oh my
Toronto
God.
area. And I was one of those 10,000. So, fingers crossed, but I'm not holding my breath.
Uh, I've been to the CNE a few times and
Fun. It's fun.
it's okay. I
Oh,
don't
you
like
don't like it?
fairs. I don't like fairs. I don't like roller
No.
coasters.
You don't like candy
Food,
apples?
the food's all right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
had pickle lemonade one year.
Ew, that's gross.
It's actually kind of good. And I had the world's spiciest burrito. It had scorpion pepper sauce or something in it.
Yeah. Was it
Uh,
actually spicy or not?
it wasn't that spicy, but it was pretty spicy, but it wasn't the spiciest thing I've ever had. I've had worse. But yeah, I don't like roller coasters, theme park rides. I really don't like the games at theme parks, especially because they're basically all rigged. Like I would rather just go to an arcade and play for tickets, and then you're guaranteed a
Yeah.
prize basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fairs, it's just not not my thing.
Um, yeah. Okay. I wanted to talk about a book I've been reading, listening to actually.
Hmm.
It's called Everyone Behaves Badly by it's about Hemingway and his, what's the book we reviewed? His first major novel,
The sun also rises.
The Sun Also Rises. Um, it's about The Sun Also Rises, and it's by a woman named M. Bloom, I believe. It's a really good book, and there's a bunch of background information I didn't have at the time, and I really I love this book. It's by Leslie M. Bloom, and
Mm.
um, one of the things that I really was sort of scandalized by was the fact that Hemingway at this time claims to be making his daily bread from his typewriter, And that's not true. He's living off the inheritance of his wife, his first wife, Hadley, I believe her name is,
Yeah, Hadley Richardson.
whose grandfather was a banker, and who
Mm,
gives her a monthly allowance. And another thing about why all these writers were in France at the time was the conversion rate. So they could live off a single dollar a day, live in a hotel off
mm,
$1 American. That's how powerful the American dollar was compared to the franc at that time. And um, so, it's I don't know. It's just really interesting to find that out, and also
mm.
to find out that he's so he'll someone will help him, and he'll immediately grab his knife and sink it into their back. He's incredibly temperamental. He's jealous. He's kind of a baby sometimes in his personal life, and very cruel.
Mm,
I believe his wife, son, and mistress go on vacation every once in a while, and that's crazy. All. By the way, the whole time he's living off the money from his wife,
mm.
and then eventually he becomes very famous, and after that wealthy, and he doesn't really require that type of financial support. But that thing that we talked about, sort of people skating off of other
Mm.
people, that was all true, and makes it's the same. I don't have it. Doesn't The novel's still beautiful? Hemingway's still a
Mm.
great writer. It's changes it a little bit, knowing that he was a bit. Yeah, he wasn't an angel.
Yeah. And there's also a lot of themes in Hemingway's work. I mean, there's The Movable Feast or A Movable Feast, sorry, where he talks about his work ethic. And when he was living in Paris, he would go down to the cafe every day and work. And there's scenes within A Sun Also Rises as well, where he's working and he likes to give off this impression that he's a kind of a working man. I mean, which he sort of
He seems to
was.
be a hard worker, but he
Yeah.
still is really struggling in those early years to make money.
Hmm. And he did join the Italian army and he did um, drive as an ambulance driver for them. I think because he had poor eyesight or something, like he didn't pass the eye exam. I forget the
I've been
details, but
trying to figure this out. I still don't know.
yeah, so he was unable to get into the infantry, so he signed up as an ambulance driver. But also, there's a short story, The Snows of Kilimanjaro, and it's really about how short life is, but there's a sort of a smaller theme about how the main character basically he became complacent and he stopped writing as much because his wife was very rich and that he didn't have to work. And a big part of the story is that he's dying essentially and he's thinking of every story that he could have written but that he didn't write and he's basically regretting all of it. But there's this you know this I don't, this idea that somehow money makes you complacent. But I mean, at the same time, like you said, he was sort of surviving off of the money that his wife had.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if his financial troubles really eased up. I don't know. I should do some more research, but um, I mean, by the time The Sun Also Rises was published, he's a star now.
Mm.
He's just hanging with Fitzgerald and a few of their wealthy friends, and
Hmm.
yeah, recognized as a literary giant.
Yeah, I think because I know that In Our Time was a success, and The Sun Also Rises was also a success. So I think had, by the time he was writing A Farewell to Arms, he was basically, yeah, a full-time writer. He was living
Yeah,
off of.
there. So The Sun Also Rises is his first novel, quote unquote, and I, I'll check it now, but I'm pretty sure that's his second novel.
I mean,
Um,
he published a novella. I think it's The Torrents of Spring is his first
yeah, yeah,
novella,
yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
but his
and
first
this,
full-length novel is,
right. Well,
yeah,
that's a
The Sun Also
parody
Rises.
of one of the people that helped him out. I think his name is Sherwood Anderson, and
Hmm.
the Torrents of Spring is like this, making fun of this author.
Mm,
And apparently that scandalized a lot of people because this Sherwood Anderson was helping Hemingway out in his early
mm,
career. And a lot of people saw it as, or were really surprised that Hemingway would stab this mentor in the back.
mm. I mean, Robert Cohn is based off of a real
Right.
writer as well,
Yep.
who was Hemingway's contemporary and who Hemingway spent time with. And
All
also,
of them, all those characters are real people who came to, most of them, really regret that they ever met Hemingway.
yeah, I mean, how awful would it feel that you're you're based off of like your character's based off of Robert Cohn? Like that's
Right.
like yeah, how awful must you feel? And A Movable Feast, I believe, was published after Hemingway's death, or no, I think it might have been published while he was living, but he wrote it in the 20s, and it's basically about him living in Paris and hanging out with Fitzgerald, and there's a lot of there's this weird relationship with Fitzgerald. He really likes Fitzgerald, but he really doesn't like Fitzgerald's wife, and
Right. Yeah.
also Fitzgerald kind of comes off as this like weak, kind of sickly man, and the Fitzgerald family really didn't like this portrayal of F. Scott Fitzgerald when it was released. So
Yeah.
Hemingway's like yeah, very critical of pretty
He's,
much everyone
yeah. And
around him.
I wonder if that's like, if you're going to be honest about someone and show everything about them, it's going to be ugly at some places. Like, it's not going to be all beautiful. And I
Mhm.
wonder if Hemingway is, if I give him the benefit of the doubt, Hemingway is like committed to truth and is committed to being honest with his readers, and he shows a full person, and because of that, that person, whoever he's portraying, is going to be pretty unhappy about the ugly parts.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, Hemingway himself is a really troubled and complex figure. I mean,
Yeah.
and he also had troubles with his mother growing up and his father. And so, yeah, I mean, he's just human. I mean, to put him or any person or literary figure on a pedestal is, I mean, pretty foolish.
Yeah.
I mean, even my God, like Dostoevsky, like he is the writer for me. Even him, he had trouble with gambling, and I mean, he wasn't perfect either.
Every single writer has this. Every single human, I'm sure, has demons.
Mm,
Tolstoy, I always like that Tolstoy is like really restraining himself to only visit the brothel twice a week. Like, there's a diary entry where he's like really upset about that. I mean, that's Tolstoy. That's maybe not an enlightened person, but like really intelligent, really
hmm
deep thinker, and he's got these things he can't really live down.
mm. He was also rich, which
He's
makes
also very
his
rich. Yeah.
yeah, it makes his writing a little bit bourgeois. He's writing about balls and, you know, rich
Yeah,
people stuff a lot.
but he's. I mean, we should do Tolstoy. We're definitely going to do a Tolstoy episode.
We should
Because
do multiple. I really like
yeah,
Tolstoy.
we should do. I
Yeah.
was thinking we could do like War and Peace, like, and there's like several books or sections or whatever. Or maybe we can do that.
hmm
We read a long thing or something. I don't know. But he's not snobbish. He's very, if anything, I think sometimes he idealizes the peasants a little too much.
Mm.
Like, he'll oh, it's been so long since I read War and Peace, but there's peasants that the main characters meet that are like totally happy, totally content with their lives, and it's
hmm
a little bit tipping into the noble savage sort of trope for me.
hmm I mean, in Anna Karenina and War and Peace, the main characters are essentially enlightened by peasants. Like Levin in Anna Karenina basically he overhears a peasant say that um, this other peasant, Fyodor, he lives for his belly, he doesn't live for God, and then click, Levin is instantly he has an enlightenment moment and he believes in God. And then Pierre in War and Peace
Pierre, yeah.
is enlightened by Platon
Platon,
Karatev.
that's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So there's always this peasant figure that somehow enlightens the main character who is lost and doesn't really
Mm.
know what they're doing with their life.
But it's always funny that the Russians like white teeth or like clean teeth, that trope
No.
of so Platon has perfect teeth. He's got white straight teeth. And in Russian literature, that's like a it's like a virtuous thing. Like that character is virtuous. Like having nice teeth is a symbol of something else that's virtuous, kind of. I'm doing a
Mm,
poor job of explaining it, but you see this even in Lolita in Nabokov's writing. He'll mention a character has like perfect teeth, and that's like
mm.
a point in their favor.
Yeah, yeah. Somehow this person's virtuous or noble because of their perfect
Uh,
set of perfect set of chompers. Um,
how about you? I mentioned the book I'm reading. You're still in the Hemingway um, thesis.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Thesis, master's thesis. I think I'm gonna read Death in the Afternoon, and you can choose to read it if you want. I mean, it's totally up to you. I read the first few pages, and I think it's really good, but you don't have to read it. But otherwise,
It's
yeah,
exclusively about bullfighting, or is it about other things?
yeah, it's nonfiction and it's about bullfighting. But it also gets into Hemingway's philosophy. Like, there's one point where he says that I don't really know much about morality, but what I think morality is anything that makes me feel good after. Which he says is like, which he
Okay.
says
Yeah.
is a stupid um, reasoning, and he can't defend it. But
Yeah.
that's what he bases his
That's
morality
interesting.
on.
That's
And so it
interesting.
is interesting. If you look at that in light of the rest of his books, it kind of almost provides a bit of a key. But maybe we can talk about my thesis once I've written it,
Also,
or we could just bury it, let it die. Like, I
or we
don't
could
care.
do a we could yeah, no, we should do it. I mean, yeah, that'd be fun. We can also do a writing one. We've talked about that, maybe doing a writing pod.
hmm Yeah, but I haven't been really watching much film. I should probably watch a movie here soon just to take a break from reading and writing. But I have been listening to a lot of music, and I don't think I've ever talked to you about music. Like,
No, what do
what are
I
you listening
listen
to?
to? I
Yeah.
listen to Motorhead. I like Motorhead. I like Elliott Smith. I
Oh,
like
crazy.
Tartini, of course. Devil's Trill Sonata is amazing.
I don't know what that is.
Uh, how about you? What are you listening to?
Right now, I'm having a really big, I don't know, alternative rock, um, punk-ish phase. Like, I'm listening to a lot of The Strokes right now, and
Mm,
this other band called Joyce Manor. Joyce Manor, their first, I think, three albums are really good. One of them's called Never Hungover Again. The other one's called Of All the Things They'll Soon Grow Tired. And then their first album, their self-titled, are all really good, but the last few albums they released have been just god awful. Like, they changed from like this really, proto-punk cool sound and like a lot of heavy vocals, and now they just sound like generic garbage pop punk. Like, it's really not good, their new stuff. But their first three albums are just like, oof, man. Like, I listen to them a lot. And the Strokes. The Strokes are just um yeah, awesome.
there's a whole like we could do a whole pod on like artists that get better as they get going as they keep doing whatever their art is, and
hmm
artists that get worse as they keep doing their
Yeah.
art. Because um okay, in the theme of Harry Potter, I read um in middle school, Hunger Games. I don't know if
hmm
you, yeah.
I never read it. No.
As first book's great, second book's okay, third book I didn't even finish, and I think Harry Potter is kind of the opposite of that. This first book is a bit rough around the edges, um, and we're going to keep reviewing Harry Potter books as we get going. I think there's like a middle section of the first book and the last book are a bit off in some ways, and then the middle the middle books are, I think, my favorite. My favorite might be Azkaban,
hmm
and she gets better as she gets going. And same thing with Shakespeare. Shakespeare first few plays not so good.
Oh God, his first
Um,
play, Titus Andronicus. Oh my God, the worst play
which
ever.
gives us all hope that we might one day improve.
Yeah, no. I
Yeah.
mean, there's this argument that punk bands, especially, you have a lot of energy when you're younger, and then as you
Mhm.
get older, you kind of like sort of seems to fizzle out, and all the teenage angst kind of disappears, and your music doesn't sound as raw anymore. But in Nirvana, so I'm Kurt Cobain kind of saw that. I mean, they've only made 3 albums, technically 4, but those 3 studio albums are just incredible. And each one gets better after the last. But even Kurt Cobain was talking about once they get old, they're going to probably change out of this really heavy grunge sound and do stuff like Johnny Cash, like playing acoustic in front of a live audience and just completely change their sound.
Love Johnny Cash.
Yeah. But I mean, Nirvana. I mean, the last live performance they did was that really famous live MTV Unplugged session, and it was incredible. I don't know if you've seen that, but you should definitely listen to that. But uh, but yeah, the inverse is yeah also true. I mean, there's this band called Interpol, and they have this. Their first album is just incredible. It's called "Turn on the Bright Lights," and somehow they just somehow got captured lightning in a bottle. It all the bass lines in that song are so good. Um, some of the guitar loops are just oh my God, amazing. But yeah, the rest of their albums after that were just kind of mid. Yeah, kind of trash. I tried listening to them. They have a
Mhm.
couple singles that are okay, but their first album is just yeah, perfect.
Do you like Rush?
Rush, a little bit. I had some friends that were really into Rush, and like progressive rock when I was growing up, but I never really got into that or I didn't get into King Crimson either. I had a lot of friends that were into you don't know.
No, no, no.
They're kind of Rush-esque. Like
Canadian?
no, I don't think they're Canadian, but um yeah, just not my I've started that's another thing I've been doing is kind of honing in on the music that I really enjoy and not really caring what's really critically acclaimed. Um I don't know. I think my favorite genres like yeah, like rock and alternative rock and grunge and punk and post-punk. Like that's really kind of my thing. I don't know. I do listen to a bit of hip hop as well. Actually, I went thrift shopping the other day and I found MF Doom's album Operation Doomsday and it was in perfect condition. I was like, what
Nice.
the so I bought it. It was $2. So yeah, but yeah, I kind of listen to a bit of everything. I've also been listening to like a little bit of people have been calling it alternative. It's like a mixture of like country and alternative rock. So like Modest Mouse is like probably the most famous, but also
Modest Mouse. Yeah.
yeah, they're sick. And
You'd
uh
like Elliott Smith. I think you should check out Elliott Smith.
Elliott Smith, yeah, I'll write that down. But I also been listening to they're really famous right now, Pine Grove.
Nope.
So it's like yeah, it's basically alternative rock, but the singer has a bit of country twang to his singing.
I feel like pods have sign-offs, like
Sign
a thing you
off.
say, like, um,
I'll let you come up with one.
yeah, I'll find one. I'll find one. If there's anyone still listening, thank you for listening. We're trying to up our quality. We're getting some cameras. Um, we're gonna be getting some new software, hopefully. For me, new Wi-Fi, getting upgrading the basics. And we'll try and get, more consistent with the uploads.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you all
So
for
thanks for
listening.
listening.